Hi, and welcome to the ITIL 2011 update presentation. In this program, we're going to take a look at what are some of the new features in ITIL 2011 and the key and most important changes that you need to be aware of in order to update your ITIL education. One of the things they've tried to do in ITIL 2011 is to create better consistency across all 5 of the ITIL books. And so the overview section in each of the 5 ITIL volumes now have identical Chapter 1 and 2, really setting the stage for the service life cycle overall. Within each of the service areas, within each of those domains, we've identified specific inputs and outputs from each of the life cycle stages, identified and put in place appropriate structures to have consistency across all books and especially across all processes. If you're familiar with the previous books, you're aware, of course, that Service Strategy and the CSI book in particular really didn't articulate processes the way that we did in Service Design, Service Transition, and Service Operation. So you're going to see that much more clarified here in ITIL 2011. In addition, they've taken the time to more specifically clarify the functions, roles, and look at particular ways to delineate the processes in CSI, like 7-step improvement process, as well as some of the service strategy processes, and we're going to talk about those together. In looking at the overall changes to the books universally, they've worked again to try to standardize Chapters 1 and 2 across each one of the books, looking at the service lifecycle holistically, the overall purpose, goals, and objectives of the various books and the service lifecycle overall, scope, value to the business, and other particular key features that they want to communicate around services generally. In addition, the structures around each process area have been specifically standardized so that within any process, whether it's a strategy process, a design process, an operations process, or what have you, all processes follow the same consistent structure. Broad purpose, goals, and objectives, the key scope, the value to the business, the particular policies and principles and key concepts associated with that process, the delineated process activities, triggers, inputs and outputs, and then the various interfaces with other process areas, key information and data that those processes are going to utilize and produce, as well as key critical success factors, performance indicators, and challenges and risks associated with that process. The first of the 5 domains that we're going to take a look at is continual service improvement. In the previous version of the CSI book, in ITIL version 3, there are a lot of core concepts, most of which make their way into ITIL 2011 as well. But here I take the time to identify and delineate very specifically the process areas supporting the 7-step improvement process, and there are also some additional changes we need to talk about. So in a nutshell, the things that have changed in ITIL 2011 with the CSI book begin with the introduction of a term called the CSI Register. In short, I want to be able to take all of my CSI opportunities and be able to manage them over their life cycle as we're building business cases, as we're doing data analysis, obviously as we implement improvements, and looking to verify that those improvements are in fact creating the benefits that we want to create. The 7-step improvement process you're already familiar with has been formalized, and you'll see that there are some small changes to how the process is structured. There have been the introduction of 3 specific sets of roles associated with CSI. You're very familiar with process owners and process managers, and obviously their roles in both supporting and being accountable for the delivery of their processes, as well as the manager ultimately being responsible for overseeing the execution of the process areas. They've introduced the notion of a process practitioner, and as the name would imply, this is someone with specific expertise either helping to develop or create the process or ultimately executing various roles within that process. The key things to keep in mind in looking at the changes in ITIL 2011 is that the 7-step improvement process is very tightly aligned to the Deming Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. In addition, the CSI Register and introducing that term is important because it helps us do a better job of controlling not only the various improvement opportunities we have, but the results that we're able to generate from them. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the 7-step improvement process, how it's been more specifically structured in ITIL 2011, and how we can go and utilize this to drive improvements to all of our services and all of our processes. In looking at the 7-step improvement process and looking at CSI in general, it's important to understand that even though it's helpful at times to think about the life cycle as working in this cyclical way, improvement activities really are pervasive. They look at improving all of the processes that we have, whether we're talking about strategy processes or design or transition or operations, and they're also looking at all of the services we deliver on behalf of all the customers that we have, and looking at what we can do to improve the utilization of the technologies that we have, the performance and the availability of the services we provide, and at the end of the day, deliver the right set of outcomes in support of our customer. So even though we can think of CSI and should think of it as a separate domain, it's a domain that fundamentally is supporting all aspects of the service lifecycle. When we think about the 7-step improvement process, the broad objective associated with this is, of course, identifying and executing on specific improvement opportunities, whether they be opportunities to improve a particular process, opportunities to improve service, or even opportunities to improve our ability to do continual service improvement at all. So in order to get there, we need to be able to effectively design and manage the activities that are going to allow us to go and assess what kinds of improvements we might want to do, how we're going to go and gather and process information against those, how we're going to do analysis and identify and recommend certain types of improvement activities, go and drive execution against those, and then of course use the feedback from those to drive next rounds of improvements. So when we think about broad goals here, it's not just about improving the services or improving the processes, but building a culture that supports ongoing, consistent improvement to all of the activities that we deliver. If we do the right job here, of course, it's going to deliver some very specific benefits to the customer. They're going to get much more effective, much more optimized services. We're going to deliver more consistent, more repeatable process, and ultimately it's going to help us use metrics and measurement in a way to help us really aim in a way that delivers more effective use of our resources and delivers more specific and better outcomes for our customer. So when we consider the scope of the 7-step improvement process, it really includes all of the things we do as a service provider, all of the service offerings we deliver, all of the service management processes we utilize, and may happen either at a technology level, looking at the various technology components that we use to deliver our services, or could look holistically at end-to-end service performance, or even the performance of particular suppliers of different aspects of services to ensure that we have proper alignment. We want to be able to make sure that we have meaningful alignment against the resources and capabilities it's going to take for us to deliver on these service improvements, so we understand cost value of the services that we're delivering, not only today, but out into the future as well. And this also gives us an opportunity to look for opportunities to leverage new technologies in a way that are going to deliver better quality of service for our customers and allow us to manage and innovate in our infrastructure to be able to serve different customer needs in the future. In addition, we need to be able to establish within our own organizational structure CSI that allows us to identify and improve our capabilities, improve and define our functions, refine our roles and responsibilities, and ensure that we have the knowledge, skills, and experience we're going to need to be able to effectively execute and deliver services. So what does the business get as a result of us consistently using the 7-step improvement process? First and foremost, it makes sure that we're delivering not just services in terms of various baskets of technologies, but that we're working to align those services explicitly to outcomes that our customers are looking for from us, not only today, but out in the future as well. So even if we design very effective service and do a really good job of understanding customer requirements and building a good service to those requirements, the customer's needs are going to evolve over time, based on changes in business conditions, changes in technical issues, legal and regulatory compliance requirements, and so forth. And so continual service improvement is very fundamental to making sure that we're not only delivering good outcomes today, but that we can deliver good outcomes tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And that means that we have to be continually assessing whether the service is in fact delivering the service. Is it delivering the outcomes that customer needs? And then how are my various service management processes supporting that? Our ability to diagnose and resolve incidents, our ability to find and eliminate errors, our ability to manage change, and so forth. And so we want to use the 7-step improvement process to use metrics and measures to specifically drive how and where we're going to try to drive improvements in all of these things so that we can deliver better outcomes over time. When you look at the broad policies, principles, and concepts that underpin and support CSI, keep in mind that we want to be able to do this in a way that allows us to use metrics explicitly to support driving improvements that we can reasonably measure. So that means putting in place appropriate policies that allow us to establish the monitoring capabilities that we need to support our services and processes, ensuring the quality and integrity of the information that we're working from, that we identify the different reporting capabilities that we're going to need against that information in order to make sure our various roles have what they need, and then to work together with our service managers to ensure that we have clearly defined service targets against our service level agreements and that we have clearly established critical success factors and key performance indicators that we're using for each of our core process areas. When we think about the broad principles that underpin the 7-step improvement process, we want to be able to deliver competitive, high-quality service. So that means we want to be able over time to do both internal and external benchmarking against the services we deliver, to be able to compare our quality of service and the quality of our processes to other services in the marketplace, and to be able to look at those services in a way that allows us to look at fit against current needs, and also to be able to look at fit against future needs, and also to consider whether we might be able to leverage new technologies or more enhanced process in a way that's going to deliver a better set of outcomes for our customers. So the broad concepts that really underpin this begin with a proactive view. We deliver the services we deliver today. We have our current processes in place, performing at whatever level of maturity they're currently performing, but we want to use CSI proactively, not waiting for horrible disruptions to occur in order to drive improvement activity, to look for ways to try to improve things. What are the things that we can do to go drive systematic, small, iterative improvements into all of our processes, all of our services, in a way that doesn't really try to create quantum leaps, but really tries to drive overall maturity through time? Again, in order for us to be really effective at this, we want to be able to integrate this across the entire life cycle so that we get better at how we do strategy management and planning, how we do design and coordination activities, how we manage change and manage and control baselines and do release and deployment and testing and validation activities, and then of course how we manage services in the operational environment as well. And we want to, based on that, define certain kinds of tools or other kinds of monitoring or measuring capabilities that we're going to need within our organization and specifically within the CSI domain to be able to support the broad level of continual service improvement activities our organization is going to want. The 7-step improvement process is designed to help us work broadly from strategy and vision for why we want to do an improvement all the way through to actually executing on an improvement activity and then rebaselining to see whether in fact we've actually gained that benefit, and then using that to help drive next steps for how we can drive additional levels of improvement. We'll go through each of these steps in turn in the following sections, but the 7-step improvement process begins with an overall strategy. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what are the key benefits we're trying to accrue to the organization, whether we're talking about a service we're delivering or whether we're talking about a process we're utilizing as part of our service management capability. Within that, we need to be able to define what things we would like to know about, what things we would like to be able to measure, and of course our capabilities to be able to actually get that information using our monitoring tools, using information that's available to us or that we can make available to us through operational monitoring activities. Once we've done that, we can go and actually gather that data out of our infrastructure, process it, perhaps using querying or reporting capabilities, and then do some analysis. What do we see? Are we winning? Are we losing? Are there certain things that we need to do differently? Are there opportunities either for corrective actions or specific improvements that we might be able to bring to bear to improve our process or service? Based on that, we're going to present that information to the different stakeholders involved, both business stakeholders, IT management stakeholders, and other IT technical and functional teams, in order to get commitment and approval to go ahead and implement the improvement. Obviously, once the improvement is implemented, we begin again and start looking at how that implementation has resulted in improvement or perhaps not, and then based on that, what we ought to do next to drive the next round of improvement activities. Let's take a look at each one of these in turn. So the first of the steps in the 7-step improvement process is having a strategy. Why are we doing this improvement? What is the context from the business's perspective on why we're doing what we're doing today? And based on that, really, where are we now? What is our current level of capability against that? So we want to understand things like the broad vision and mission, and even specific goals and objectives for a particular service or a particular process. What are we intending to try to do with that service? How well are we really doing that today? How well is that aligned with the broad strategies, both in terms of IT strategy and, more importantly, in terms of business strategy for the customer? And then making sure that we have the right context for the improvement. So this is especially important if I want to try to drive improvements to particular technology stacks, for example. That sounds nice, but how is that driving specific value and outcomes to the customer? What are we trying to win from the customer's point of view? And how and what is it about this service that makes it valuable to the customer? What are the outcomes it's supposed to support for them? What are the ways that the customer utilizes this service in order to be able to perform their work? And then based on that, what is the context for doing the improvement activity? How, in fact, is this going to help my customer perform their work better, faster, or more cost effectively than they can do it today? Once we've gone and understood the broad vision and mission and the overall goals and objectives for the service or process we're trying to drive an improvement to, we want to be able to link those down to specific measures. How do I measure those things today? Do I have defined critical success factors and key performance indicators? Do I have specifically defined service level targets that are in my service level agreements? Do I have defined sets of objectives for the various staff roles that are going to be performing these activities? And then based on that, what's my ability to actually measure the things that I want to be able to measure to be able to drive this improvement activity? This means looking at my data collection capabilities, what types of monitoring and measurement tools I have at my disposal, querying and reporting capabilities, ability to do modeling, simulation or analytical modeling against these things, and then to be able to look at the quality of the data sources I both have now or could go and acquire to make sure that I know exactly where those measurement opportunities are going to be. So if step one is understanding the broad context of what the service or process is about, step two is really about understanding what it is I both can and want to measure that's going to give me meaningful information to drive an improvement. At step three, what we're going to be doing is actually gathering specific data from our environment about the particular service or process we're trying to improve. If I'm looking at a service, for example, I might be monitoring a particular service looking for event exceptions that suggest that a particular service is exceeding a threshold or maybe down altogether. Be looking for specific resolutions when that service or that component comes back up for the purpose of understanding something about the service's availability or particular things that may be impacting that service or impacting users of that service. In many cases, we're actually going to be working very closely with service operations teams to help support us in this activity. In the same way that they may be doing operational monitoring of services and backups and other kinds of jobs, they're probably going to be working closely with us to help capture certain information, to be able to provide us information from event logs, to be able to monitor the performance of certain devices or certain services, and ultimately for us to be able to spotlight the key aspects of the service that we want to be able to look at without being overwhelmed by all of the data capabilities that we might have. Now, keep in mind it's important for us to understand what it is that we're trying to look at and what kinds of data we're trying to gather so that we understand a little bit about where we're aiming. So if I'm looking at a particular device, for example, I'm using what we would call a technology metric. Think about server uptime or network throughput or something to that extent. Those give us some level of understanding of the current performance of that piece. And that may be useful for us in terms of optimizing the technology, but may or may not deliver specific key outcomes or key value to the customer. Customer is going to be much more interested in things like service metrics. What is the end-to-end performance or end-to-end availability of certain key services? And then based on that, what are the potential improvement opportunities for driving overall improvement in service availability, service security, service performance, and so forth. Likewise, process metrics are going to help us look at specific process activities, the number of successful changes we're doing in a particular period of time, or the mean time to restore service for particular process areas like incident management. So it's important to understand during the data gathering phase, of course, exactly what it is that we want to get. And so in step 2, we really try to get a sense of where and how much and what the quality of that data is going to be. Here we're really going and gathering that data up to prepare it for doing a more detailed review. Once we've actually gone and gathered up the data, and you can envision that as almost capturing it in a great big data warehouse, I want to be able to process that data in some useful way so that I can do an analysis. And one way to mentally think about this is querying and reporting. I want to go run certain kinds of queries or capture certain kinds of reporting out of that pool of data that's going to allow me to start driving improved awareness, information, knowledge, and hopefully down the road wisdom about how that information is driving value for the customer, how that service or that process is actually performing, and then to be able to use that information to go make recommendations for improvement. Now, this may involve putting in place and utilizing certain kinds of tools that are going to help us do those extracts and that ultimately are going to help us also do things like doing quality assurance against the information we're using. Is this in fact accurate information? Can I make meaningful management decisions based on the quality of the data that I have? Once we've gone and we've done our processing of the data, we've generated some queries or some reports or gathered the key things that we want, now it's time to actually do the detailed analysis. In short, what's happening? Are we winning? Are we losing? Are there positive or negative trends that we can find? Are there corrective actions that we may want to take? Are there clear improvement opportunities that may present themselves based on what we see? And then based on all of these, our targets, based on the data we're actually performing, are we meeting those targets? Are there fundamental issues in how the service or how the process is performing? And where possible, can we understand the financial implications of those process errors in terms of impacting customers and impacting their ability to leverage and use the services? One way to think about how the 7-step improvement process is going to support us in driving improvements overall and how the analysis may help us is thinking specifically about what we might call the chain of metrics, or moving from the broadest view of the organization's vision, why the organization exists and what the outcomes the organization is trying to create, and how that plays down to specific mission activities the organization carries in, specific goals and objectives the organization has or that the service has, and then specifically how we then define critical success factors and key performance indicators in support of those objectives. Eventually, those key performance indicators are going to have to, we're going to have to define metrics that we're going to use against those in order to find them, and then specific measures we can use to make that happen. So let's take a specific example to walk you through how this might work. So at the highest level, as an organization, I'm trying to deliver certain kinds of outcomes for my customer. Let's say I'm an online bookstore and I'm trying to offer customers the ability to get quick and ready access to ebooks that they can read in real time if necessary to support whatever enjoyment requirements or research requirements they have. So my mission may be to create and deliver certain online bookstore capabilities in support of those customers. I may have specific goals in terms of market share that I want to achieve, revenue and profit goals as a business, and then key objectives that are going to support that. What are the specific things that we're going to go do to go try to make those goals happen? And they may include goals across the organization, goals in marketing, goals in sales, goals in operations, goals in finance, and so forth. Each one of those, in order to be achieved, may have specific critical success factors. One of those may be that the underpinning IT services that enable that online bookstore achieve certain levels of availability and capacity and enable the customer to be able to do the book ordering that we want them to do. And then when we start getting down to key performance indicators, we may want to measure exactly what the availability requirements, performance requirements, and security requirements are going to need to be in order to make sure that we're delivering the right level of service for that customer. As that plays down to metrics, I'm going to have a way to actually specifically capture those availability statistics and ultimately at the measures level be able to use certain tools to gather quality data that I can use to assess and report on performance against those. So what we want to be able to do is to create strategic alignment between the broad vision and mission of the organization and then drive that all the way down to specific key performance indicators, metrics, and measures we use to provision and deliver services in support of that. And to be able to chain those both in terms of how we establish them top down and then how we measure and report against performance bottom up.